The Painter's Daughter. Part 1. The Girl with the Sketchbook. The laughter stopped the moment the sketchbook opened. 1 second, 90 men were filling a garage with the particular noise of people who have known each other long enough to be completely comfortable, the kind of laughter that bounces off concrete and metal and rolls out through open bay doors into the New Mexico afternoon without apology. The next second, every sound in the building ceased as though someone had reached into the room and pulled the wire. The girl standing at the center of that silence did not move, did not step back, did not reach for the book to close it or shift the wooden box of paintbrushes under her arm or adjust the worn canvas backpack on her shoulder. She stood exactly where she had been standing when the laughter started and waited for what would come next. Her name was Maya Cole. She was 18 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, and she had not traveled 11 hours on a Greyhound bus to be unsettled by silence. The morning had begun before dawn at a bus station in Tucson, Arizona, where the air smelled like industrial cleaner and the coffee machines had been running since midnight. Maya bought her ticket in cash. She sat 3 rows from the back and put her headphones in without playing anything and watched the city dissolve behind the windows as the sun came up over the desert. Her mother did not know she was gone. That was a deliberate choice, not a careless one. Her mother was the most honest person Maya had ever known, and Maya had spent her entire life trying to be the same. But honesty and permission are different things, and her mother would have withheld permission with both hands. Would have sat across the kitchen table with the expression she wore when fear disguised itself as calm and said, "Not yet, not alone, not like this." And Maya would have had to explain everything. The 2 years of work since the first letter from Conrad Rawls arrived. The way she had watched her mother read that letter, fold it carefully, and put it in the kitchen drawer without a single word. The 3 years before that spent with her father's sketchbooks spread across her bedroom floor, learning every mark in them, until the marks were as familiar as her own handwriting. The threads she had followed until all of them converged on a single place. It would have been a long conversation. Her mother would have been right that it was dangerous and wrong that it couldn't wait, and neither of those things would have changed the fact that there was no other way. So Maya left a note on the counter. Gone to find answers. I love you. I'll call when I get there. She signed it with the small curved line her father had taught her to use as a signature when she was 7, the same line he had used himself, a particular sweep of the wrist that functioned like a fingerprint. Her mother would recognize it, would understand exactly what it meant, would worry through the entire day regardless, because that was what her mother did, and no note was ever going to be long enough to stop it. The bus ride took 11 hours. Maya spent most of it looking out the window at a landscape that seemed to have existed long before human beings arrived with their ideas and would continue long after. Red rock and scrub and distances that did not end so much as simply continue without comment. She kept her father's 3rd sketchbook in her lap without opening it. She had read it enough times that it would not tell her anything new. She wanted it close the way you want certain things close when you are moving towards something difficult. She got off at the Route 9 junction at 2 in the afternoon. No one was waiting. A gas station sat across the road. A truck stop occupied the distance to the north. The bus driver left her on the gravel shoulder with a nod that contained no opinion about an 18-year-old woman traveling alone to a place with no taxi service. The walk to the Iron Oath Motorcycle Club's regional clubhouse was 3 miles of cracked asphalt and scrub brush that she had studied on maps and satellite images, and a yellow legal pad of notes. The July heat in that part of New Mexico is not a weather condition so much as a presence, something that settles onto your shoulders the moment you step into it and communicates its absolute indifference to your plans. Maya walked all 3 miles without stopping. She heard the clubhouse before she saw it. The layered sound of motorcycle engines running reached her a quarter-mile out, a sound she recognized below the level of conscious memory in the part of the body that stores things absorbed too early and too sensorily to become actual recollection. She had been 4 years old, possibly 3, sitting on her father's shoulders in a place that sounded exactly like this, and the rumble had passed through his chest and into hers and found somewhere to live that it had apparently never left. She stopped at the edge of the lot and looked at the building. It was larger than she had expected, a structure that had grown across decades in the way that things grow when purpose continues longer than any single plan accounts for. American flags at both corners of the entrance. A faded mural on the east wall, the winged imagery the Iron Oath used painted in a style she knew better than she knew almost anything. That style was in her hands, had been there as long as she could remember. She looked at the mural for a moment. Then she looked at her hands the way she had been looking at them since she was 15 and began to understand what they were capable of. Then she pushed the gate open and walked into the lot. 91 people were on the grounds that Saturday, a number she would learn later. The annual gathering brought chapters from 4 states together for the memorial ride, leaving the following morning. Some of these men had been riding together for 30 years. Others were newer in their 40s and 50s men who had joined the organization long after the story Maya was following had already been absorbed into the chapter's history and transformed into something approaching legend. Nobody noticed her at first. She made certain of that. She moved along the edges of the crowd with the unhurried observation her father had called reading a room, the practice of understanding a space before making any demands of it. She noted who deferred to whom, where the weight of the room settled, which men talked with the confidence of people performing, and which held the particular stillness of people who had long since stopped needing to. She found the man she was looking for near the main garage bay. Stone Briggs was 58 years old, built with the density of someone who had spent decades doing physical work without thinking about it as a category. Silver hair cropped close to his head, both arms covered from wrist to shoulder in layered ink, decades of work applied over decades, a life recorded in installments. His face carried the stillness of a man who had learned through experience and possibly some expensive lessons that most situations do not require a response until you have finished forming an opinion about them. He was examining a fuel tank with 2 other men when Maya walked up. All 3 turned. Stone looked at her the way experienced people look at unexpected things, not dismissive, not welcoming, completely neutral. Gathering data. "You looking for someone?" he said. "I'm looking for work," Maya said. "I paint motorcycles. Custom work. I was wondering if anyone here needed something done." She let one beat pass. "I work for tips." The man to Stone's left, broad-shouldered and somewhere in his mid-40s with a patch reading "Torque" on his vest, began to smile. He said something quiet to the man beside him. The information moved outward through the nearest cluster of people, and the laughter began first in pockets, and then all at once the easy laughter of men in a good mood handed unexpected entertainment. An 18-year-old girl with a backpack and a paint box asking to do custom work for tips. Torque called across to a group nearby. "Kid says she does portraits. Says she can restore original custom work." Bigger laughter. Broader now. Maya stood in it and waited. Stone raised one hand. Not a command more, a suggestion. The noise settled. "Let me see your sketchbook," he said. Maya unzipped her backpack, took out the sketchbook, and laid it open on the workbench between them. The laughter stopped so completely it was as though it had never existed. From across the garage, a man named Earl Dawson had been watching without approaching. 61 years old, senior member, over 20 years, with the Iron Oath. He saw Stone turn the first page. He saw the expression on Stone's face change in the way that certain expressions change when they are replaced by something larger and more serious. Earl Dawson walked toward the workbench without quite deciding to stop at its edge, looked at the open page for 4 seconds, and then looked away. Something moved in his throat. He did not speak. Stone turned pages with the deliberateness of someone who understands what they are looking at and is taking the time to be certain they are seeing it correctly. Torque had stopped smiling entirely. The men flanking Stone had leaned in. The drawings were extraordinary in the complete sense of that word, without qualification or age-related caveat. Motorcycle portraits rendered with a technical precision that exceeded skill and approached some other category of attention. Wing designs requiring both mechanical understanding and genuine artistic instinct. Portraits of men on bikes that captured not just physical appearance, but the particular quality of stillness that accumulates in people who have spent decades doing one thing and come to love it without needing to say so. But it was the style itself that stopped Stone Briggs. He knew that style. Every man over 45 on the lot knew that style. Stone looked up slowly. His voice remained level, but something beneath the level had shifted. "Where did you learn to draw like this?" Maya met his eyes without looking away. "My father taught me," she said. "Who's your father?" "Ray Cole," Maya said. The name did what certain names do in rooms full of people who share a history with them. It did not make noise. It made silence, and then the silence spread outward in rings, the way disturbance spreads through still water. Ray Cole. The name moved from face to face like something electrical passing through the crowd in the way that words pass through groups of people who all carry the same response to them. Men who had been 20 feet away drifted closer without noticing they were doing it. A wrench was set down. A conversation stopped mid-sentence and stayed stopped. Stone had not looked away from her face. "Ray Cole," he said, slowly, placing the name in the context it belonged to. "Ray Cole's daughter." "Maya Cole," she said. "I'm 18. I've been trying to find out what happened to my father for 2 years. I was told the people who knew him best would be here this weekend." She held his gaze, so I came. Stone looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the sketchbook, turned 2 more pages, and stopped at a drawing that Earl Dawson recognized with a physical precision. A particular design built around the Iron Oath's traditional wing imagery, rendered with the exact choices, the exact color relationships, and structural decisions that Earl had watched being made in this garage, at a bench not 20 feet from where he currently stood 15 years ago. Stone closed the sketchbook carefully and pushed it back across the bench. "Can you do tanks?" he said. "Yes. Full custom, paint on metal, not sketches." "I've done 47 bikes since I was 12, Maya said. "I have photographs." Stone was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to Torque. "Pull the old Sportster from the back. The stripped one." Torque looked at him. "Stone?" "The stripped one," Stone said in exactly the same tone with exactly the same weight. "Give her what she needs." They gave her a stripped fuel tank and fender off a 1978 Sportster that had been sitting in the back of the garage for 2 years, waiting for someone to figure out what to do with it. Professional paint supplies along the back wall. Equipment that serious painters used. And then they stepped back. What happened over the next 2 hours would be described differently by every person who witnessed it, and all of their descriptions would be accurate. Some said she was fast, others said she was slow and meditative. Both were true because she moved quickly when quickness served the work and held completely still when stillness did, and she always seemed to know which was required. Some said she barely looked at the metal. Others said she never looked away. Also both true depending on the moment and what you understood about how painters who mean it actually work. What all 91 people agreed on afterward was the moment at the 90-minute mark when Earl Dawson walked up to the tank where Maya was working, looked at what she was doing, and had to walk away and sit down alone by the fence for 7 minutes. He had ridden with Ray Cole for 14 years, had watched him paint in this exact garage at benches like this one, making exactly these choices about line and color and the particular negative space within the wing designs, where Ray always placed the things he kept for people who knew how to look. When Earl came back, he stood behind Maya without speaking and watched her finish. His jaw was set. His hands were at his sides. Nobody asked him to explain what was on his face, and he did not offer to. When Maya set down her brush and stepped back, the garage was quiet, in the way that certain rooms go quiet when something has entered them that changes the weight of the air. The artwork was extraordinary before anyone's analytical mind had time to form an opinion about it. A complex design built around the Iron Oath's traditional imagery, rendered with mastery that should have required decades to accumulate. And layered within it, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, specifically hidden symbols worked into the negative space of the wings, placed exactly where Ray Cole had always placed them. A curved flourish in the lower left corner that was not initials, not a name, but a specific line that functioned like a fingerprint. Ray Cole's fingerprint. Stone stood before the tank for a long time. When he turned to Maya, his face held too many things at once for any single expression to contain. "Your father showed you all of this," he said. "The symbols, the placement, everything." "Everything I know he taught me," Maya said. "Some directly, some from his sketchbooks." She paused. "He left 3 of them. My mother kept them in a box for 12 years. She gave them to me on my 15th birthday. Stone looked at her steadily. "I don't think she expected me to spend the next 3 years learning every mark in them," Maya said. "Why did you—" Maya considered the question the way she considered most things without hurrying toward an answer that was less than accurate. "Because he was my father," she said, "and because I wanted to understand what he was trying to say. Not just in the paintings, in everything." She looked at the fuel tank. "He built things into his work that most people never saw. I spent 3 years learning what they meant, and what I understood at the end of 3 years is that I can't answer the questions I still have from sketchbooks alone." "What questions?" Stone said. "Why he disappeared," Maya said. "Who he was to the people here. What happened on the charity ride 12 years ago." She met his eyes directly. and why a man named Conrad Rawls has been trying to buy my father's remaining artwork from my mother for 2 years. The name moved through the room differently than Ray Cole's name had. Ray Cole's name had carried warmth, recognition, the particular grief that gathers around someone who has been missed for a long time. Conrad Rawls's name carried something colder and heavier, and Stone's face did not change, but something behind it shifted in a way that Maya registered and stored carefully away. "Where did you hear that name?" Stone said. "From my mother. 4 contacts over 2 years. Significant offers for any original work my father left behind. He claims they had a business arrangement." She held Stone's gaze. "My mother says she never heard my father mention him once." Quiet in the garage. "She didn't sell him anything?" Stone asked. "She stopped taking his calls. 3 weeks after the last contact, someone came through our kitchen window while we were both out. Nothing was taken. The only areas disturbed were my father's storage boxes, my mother's important paperwork, and my room." Stone looked at Earl. Something passed between them, the kind of exchange between people who have known each other long enough to communicate without using words. Stone turned back to Maya. "You're staying this weekend," he said. It was not a question. "That was my hope," Maya said. "We'll find you a room. Tomorrow morning before the ride, you're going to sit with me and Earl and some others. You're going to tell us everything about Conrad Rawls." He held her gaze. "And we're going to tell you everything we remember about your father." Maya exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. Stone looked at her for one more moment. "One more thing." "What?" "Your father was one of the most important people this chapter ever had. Not because of the paintings, though God knows those were something. Because of who he was." He paused. "Whatever you came here looking for, you're going to find it. But you're also going to find things you weren't expecting. You understand me?" Maya Cole, standing in a garage full of 91 people who had somehow recognized something in her face before they knew her name, thought about 11 hours on a Greyhound bus and 3 years of sketchbooks spread across a bedroom floor, and a phone that had rung 4 times with a voice her mother had refused to trust. "I understand," she said. She didn't. Not yet, but she was about to. That evening, long after the test painting was finished and the lot had settled into the slow rhythms of a gathering of people who had not seen each other in months, Maya sat alone in the small room they had given her and opened her father's 3rd sketchbook to its last page. She had read this page so many times the words had worn grooves in her memory. It was different from every other page in the 3 books. No drawing, no design study, no technical notation. Just words in her father's cramped, leaning hand and a date 3 days before he disappeared. Before the charity ride. Before a 6-year-old girl stopped waiting by the front window. "What you build in secret will speak louder than anything you say out loud. The work is the truth. Protect the work." She closed the sketchbook. She looked at her hands in the lamplight, turned them over once. The same hands that had spent 2 hours today doing what her father had spent his life doing. Making marks that carried more than they appeared to carry. Building truth into surfaces where it could wait. Outside, someone started an engine. The deep note of it moved through the walls and settled in her chest, that old sound that had lived in her body before she had language for it. She lay in the dark in a building her father had known and listened to the desert settle into night. Tomorrow she would begin learning what he had been trying to tell her. She had waited 18 years. She could wait until morning. Part 2. What the Painting Knows. Earl Dawson knocked at 6 in the morning carrying 2 cups of coffee and the particular look of a man who had not slept, which was the same look Maya saw every morning in whatever reflective surface she happened to pass. She stepped back to let him in. He took the chair. She sat on the edge of the bed. Neither of them spoke for a moment, and the silence between them had the specific quality of 2 people carrying the same weight from opposite ends, trying to find the right way to set it down. "I knew your father for 19 years, Earl said. He held his cup the way a man holds something he genuinely needs. Rode with him for 14 of those. Watched him paint for all of them." He was quiet for a moment. "When you were working on that tank yesterday, I had to walk away." "I know," Maya said. "You know why? Because it looked like his work." Earl shook his head once slowly. "Because it was his work. Not similar, not influenced by. The exact same hand making the exact same decisions with the exact same instincts." He looked at her. "I've been in and around this work for a long time. I know the difference between imitation and the real thing. That was the real thing. Maya looked at her coffee. He used to let me sit beside him when I was small, 3, 4 years old. I don't retain it as memories exactly, more as impressions. The smell of the paint, the sound of the brushes, his hands moving. She paused. My mother always said I absorbed things before I had any framework for understanding I was absorbing them. She's right, Earl said. That's precisely what happened to you. He studied the floor between them with the expression of a man sorting through a long accumulation of things he has been keeping in a specific order and deciding where the right place to begin is. What did she tell you, he said, about how he disappeared? That he went on a charity ride and didn't come back. Police investigation for 6 months, nothing conclusive. The chapter looked for years. Maya lifted her eyes. And that she never believed the official version of what happened. Not for one day. Earl's jaw set. He nodded once, the nod of a man who has been carrying an agreement unspoken for a very long time and is finally placing it where it belongs. Neither did we, he said. The morning meeting assembled in the back office, a room with a long table and walls, layered in photographs going back decades. Men on bikes in different eras. The machines evolving, the faces aging and being replaced by faces that would age in turn. Time kept the way communities keep it, not in documents but in images, in the accumulation of people who showed up year after year until one year they didn't. Stone Briggs sat to Maya's left, Earl to her right. Diane Mercer sat across from her mid-50s with the sharp eyes and economical movements of someone who had been responsible for things long enough that efficiency had become invisible. 18 years as the chapter's financial officer. Walt Hicks occupied the far end of the table, 65 years old, the senior member present, carrying the quality of old timber weight-bearing in a way not immediately apparent until something required it. And at the corner, saying nothing, simply present with the focused attention of someone who had made presence. His entire practice sat a man everyone called Dutch. 35 years of showing up to every significant event in the chapter's history. Apparently, he had forgotten none of them. Tell us about Rawls, Stone said. Everything you have. Maya laid it out the way she had organized it across 2 years of careful private work. Conrad Rawls, 62, Phoenix-based. Construction and real estate as the foundation with significant interests in event promotion and charitable fundraising. A public identity constructed almost entirely from philanthropy, hospital wings, scholarship programs. Veteran support initiatives, the kind of man whose name ended up on buildings and whose photograph appeared alongside elected officials at fundraising galas. The kind of man the world had collectively decided to trust before he had done anything specific to earn that particular designation. First contact with her mother had come 2 years ago when Maya was 16. A letter on professional stationery offering to purchase any original artwork by Ray Cole the family might possess. The offer was generous in a way that communicated something more specific than ordinary interest. A number that meant the buyer wanted something particular and wanted it without attention. Her mother had not responded. Second and third contacts came as phone calls 6 months apart. Professional, courteous, each one carrying slightly more urgency than the last, in a way designed to read as enthusiasm rather than pressure. Claiming a prior business arrangement, a commission relationship entitling him to first consideration. What business arrangement? Diane said. The precision in her voice was the precision of someone who has spent years dealing in specifics and learned to distrust claims that resist them. He wouldn't specify, Maya said. My mother asked directly on the second call. He said it was a private matter better discussed in person. She paused. She declined to meet. After the fourth call, her mother stopped answering unknown numbers. 3 weeks later, someone entered their apartment through the kitchen window on a Tuesday night. Nothing was taken. 3 areas were searched with care: her father's storage boxes, her mother's desk, Maya's room. The searcher had been tidy about it. Wanted the visit to appear not to have happened. They were looking for something, Diane said. Statement, not question. The paintings, Dutch said. First words from the corner. Everyone turned. He was watching Maya with the focused attention of someone placing a piece into a picture he has been constructing for a long time. Your father's remaining original work, Dutch said. They needed to know whether you had it and where. That's my conclusion, Maya said. What I don't understand is why specific paintings would justify that level of risk from someone in Rawls' position. A break-in. 4 years of contact. That isn't someone who wants a piece of art. The table was quiet for a moment. Then Earl said, tell her about the charity ride. Stone looked at Earl with the look that means a question has been answered before it was asked. Then he looked at Maya. The ride Ray disappeared from, organized to raise money for veterans' families. 3 days, 4 states, 22 riders. Ray went as the chapter's representative and to document the ride artistically. He was going to create a commemorative piece from it. Stone paused. They raised a significant amount. Corporate donations, private individuals, event sales along the route. The funds were intended for 2 veteran support organizations, Diane said. Her voice had taken on a particular flatness, the voice of someone reciting something they have memorized, because memorizing was the only way to discuss it without losing control of the discussion. Intended. There were serious questions afterward about how much actually reached those organizations, Stone said. The discrepancy was large enough that people in the chapter started asking difficult questions. Ray was one of them. Maya held herself very still. He disappeared 4 days after he told Earl he had found something he needed to document, Stone said. Earl's hands tightened around his cup. I've gone over that conversation in my head more times than I can count, he said quietly. He said, Earl, I found something and I need to document it the right way before I do anything else with it. A pause waited with 11 years of replay. I asked what that meant. He said, you know what it means. You know how I document things. The room understood. Maya understood. Her father documented things the way artists document things. Not in files susceptible to deletion, not in records that could be altered, or words that could be disputed. In paint, in work, hidden inside images that would survive long past the circumstances that created them waiting for the right reader. Nothing was found afterward, Maya asked. In his studio, his belongings. We went through everything, Diane said. His studio had been cleared out. Professionally, not ransacked. His tools were there, his reference materials, his personal effects. But the canvases, the finished and unfinished work, most of it was gone. She paused. We assumed whatever he had documented went with them. Most of them, Maya said carefully. Diane looked at her with the sharpened attention of someone who has just heard a word that changes the shape of a sentence. What do you know? She said. I don't know anything yet, Maya said. But Rawls is still looking, which means he doesn't have everything, which means whatever my father documented most carefully is somewhere he hasn't found it. Walt Hicks leaned forward at his end of the table. 65 years old, and every word he selected had been chosen over every word he rejected. There's a storage unit, he said. He said it to the table, but his eyes were on Maya. Route 9, about 12 miles from here. Ray rented it for years. Overflow work reference materials, pieces he wasn't using. When he disappeared, we paid the rent for 2 years expecting him to come back. A glance at Stone. After 2 years, we let it go. What happened to the contents? Maya said. The owner at the time was a man named Briggs. He knew Ray and knew what Ray meant to this chapter. He locked the unit and left it untouched. Wouldn't let anyone near it. Walt paused. Briggs died 4 years ago. His daughter inherited the property and called us about the unit. He reached into his jacket and placed a key on the table. Old metal that had taken on the color of the air around it. I've had this for 4 years, Walt said. Never opened it. He looked at Maya steadily. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Turns out I was waiting for you. Maya looked at the key, then at Walt. Take me there today, she said. The ride leaves tomorrow morning, Stone said. After the ride or before, whenever. But I need to see that unit. Stone considered it for exactly the amount of time he needed to. Then he nodded once. After the ride, he said. The memorial ride left at 9 the following morning. 91 bikes in formation, the sound of them filling the air long after they had cleared the county road. Maya rode in the support vehicle with Diane, who spent the first portion of the journey in purposeful silence, and the second half asking questions that were really carefully constructed observations. The technique of someone who wants to understand a person without the distortion that explicit interrogation creates. Diane had known Ray Cole for 15 years. She spoke about him the way people speak about someone whose absence has left a permanent shape in the air around where they used to be. Precise, specific. Without sentimentality, but underneath the precision grief that had learned to be quiet about itself. He used to bring you here sometimes, Diane said. 3, 4 years old. Saturday mornings your mother would drop you both off and he'd work all day, and you'd sit under the work table drawing on whatever paper he gave you. Maya watched the desert move past the window and said nothing. You drew a horse once and showed it to him, Diane said. He told you the hindquarters were off proportionally. You cried for about 30 seconds, and then you drew it again. A pause. He kept that second drawing pinned above his workstation for months. I saw it every time I walked through. Maya's jaw tightened barely. He talked about you constantly, Diane said. What you were learning, what made you curious, what made you laugh. He used to say you were going to do something with the work that he hadn't imagined yet. He didn't know what it was, but he was certain. Maya turned from the window. Did you believe he was dead? Diane gave the question the serious attention it deserved. Not for the first few years. We thought he was hiding that he'd appear when it was safe. After 5 years, most people's understanding shifted. After 10, it's very hard to sustain hope that has no material to feed on. She paused. But I never believed he simply vanished from a road and left no trace. That story was never right. A man that precise and that careful doesn't disappear without leaving something behind. My mother felt the same way, Maya said. From the beginning. Your mother, Diane said carefully, is either the strongest woman I've never met or the most stubborn. Ray used to say she was both of those things. Despite everything, Maya almost smiled. The ride returned in the late afternoon. 91 bikes in the same formation, the same sound, and watching them come back had a quality that settled into Maya's chest in a way she had not anticipated. These were the people her father had chosen, not assigned to not born among, chosen deliberately and been chosen back. And for 12 years they had held his memory with the kind of fidelity that most people never inspire in anyone at all. She thought about the last page of the third sketchbook. What you build in secret will speak louder than anything you say out loud. He had built something in secret. It had been waiting for someone who had his eyes in his hands and the willingness to come looking. Stone found her before the crowd had fully dispersed. Ready, he said. She was. The storage facility on Route 9 had the quality of a place that had been accumulating time for years without interruption. A long row of metal door units behind chain-link fence, a place designed to ask nothing and reveal nothing. Unit 14 was near the back. The padlock had been there long enough to take on the color of the surrounding air. Walt was already there with the key. Stone and Earl had come in Stone's truck. Maya rode with Diane. Walt approached the door with the expression of a man about to open something he has kept closed for a long time, not from fear of what is inside, but because keeping it closed had preserved a particular possibility that opening it would change into something else. He put the key in, turned it, stepped back. The door rolled up. Paint and turpentine hit Maya first in the specific ratio she knew from her father's studio in Tucson, from the memory of Saturday mornings that lived in her body rather than in images. She stood at the threshold and breathed it in and did not move. Take your time, Stone said quietly. She went in. The unit had been organized according to a logic that was not immediately readable, but was clearly present, the logic of a mind that knew exactly where everything was and had expected to return for it. Reference books in labeled boxes, supplies organized by category, wooden crates sealed with hardware cloth, and along the back wall in flat storage racks, canvases. Maya moved through this space the way her father had taught her to approach any collection. Read before you touch. Understand what you are looking at before you decide what it means. Most of the canvases matched descriptions in the sketchbooks. Studies, experiments, work left unfinished. She moved through them with even hands. On the fourth rack, she stopped. Her hand was on something heavier than it should have been, rolled rather than stretched. Wrapped in a second layer of oilcloth and tied with a double knot, she recognized the way you recognize handwriting you have known since childhood. Ray Cole's knot. For work he needed to survive. She stood with her hand on it without moving. What is it? Earl said from behind her. I don't know yet, Maya said. She cleared the canvases around it, lifted it free, stood it upright. Large, roughly 5 feet heavy with serious paint on serious canvas. She untied the oilcloth with hands that were steady by effort and unwrapped it carefully. She needed floor space to unroll it. Stone and Earl and Walt and Diane watched the painting reveal itself in sections. At first it read as a crash scene, motorcycle accident. The dark expressionism Ray used for work he needed to carry real weight. Violent, chaotic, real in the particular way that only comes from having been there. Then the faces. Maya stopped unrolling. In the center of the canvas, three faces rendered with portrait-grade precision. Not impressionistic, not suggested. The accuracy of someone who had seen these faces clearly and under circumstances that burned them permanently into memory. Two of the three faces she did not recognize. They were painted with the same unflinching precision as everything else, men whose names she did not yet have, but whose faces her father had made certain would survive long enough for someone to find and identify them. One face she recognized from professional stationery, from a letter her mother had shown her 2 years ago and then put in a drawer without speaking. Conrad Rawls. Maya made herself finish unrolling the canvas. The lower section was denser layered in the way her father worked when he was encoding rather than simply creating. Dates worked into the border design, numbers incorporated into the decorative elements, and text, actual written text, small and exact, embedded in the negative space of the composition so that it was completely invisible to anyone who was not looking for it and entirely legible to anyone who was. Maya leaned in and read. She read for a long time. No one behind her spoke. The unit was quiet except for Route 9 traffic in the distance and the occasional settling of metal walls as the afternoon heat began to release. When she sat back, something had completed itself in her. Not peace, the particular steadiness of a question, finally answered in the way you always knew it would be. "What does it say?" Stone asked. His voice had the careful quality of a man who has been waiting 12 years for a moment and is afraid of breaking it with the wrong word. Maya looked up at him. "My father didn't disappear," she said. Her voice was even. "He was run off the road. This crash is that crash. He survived long enough to reach this unit and finish documenting what he had found." She looked back at the canvas. Rawls was running a diversion scheme through the charity events, moving money into shell accounts before it reached the veterans organizations. My father traced the mechanism, followed specific transactions, and encoded the documentation here. She paused. "The three faces in the crash scene are the three men who ran him off the road." Absolute silence in the unit. "One of them is Conrad Rawls," Earl said, reading over her shoulder. "One of them is Conrad Rawls," Maya confirmed. Walt already had his phone out, his hands completely still. "I'm calling Frank Okafor," he said. Stone was looking at the canvas with an expression that had no single name, because it was made of grief and fury and resolution all present at once, none of them canceling the others. "Your father knew someone would find this eventually," he said quietly. "He built it so the right person would." Maya looked at the painting, at the faces, at the hidden text, at 12 years of patience encoded in oil and canvas, waiting in a locked room for someone with the right eyes. "He built it for me," she said. "He just didn't know it would take this long." Frank Okafor arrived the next morning in a dark gray suit that had no business being in a clubhouse parking lot. 60 years old, compact, precise, with the careful eyes of someone who had spent 30 years in courtrooms learning to assess before revealing. He shook Maya's hand with both of his. "Your father did pro bono work for a legal aid organization I was involved with," he said. "We had dinner a few times afterward. He never told me what he was documenting. I wish he had." He released her hand. "Let's look at the painting." He brought a professional photographer and a forensic art consultant named Dr. Lena Pruitt, who worked primarily with courts and insurance companies, and brought to the work the focused absence of performance that marks people who are genuinely very good at something specific. Dr. Pruitt spent 90 minutes with the canvas under portable lighting before she straightened and addressed Frank. "Paint chemistry consistent with 12 to 14 years old," she said. "Lab analysis will confirm, but the aging signatures are right. The embedded text is original to the work under the final glazing layer. It was part of the original composition, not added after." She paused. "Whoever did this understood documentation. The text is inside the work, protected by the work." She glanced at Maya. "Did your father have formal training in forensic documentation?" "Not formally," Maya said. "He believed that if something was worth recording, it was worth recording correctly." Dr. Pruitt nodded slowly. "He recorded this correctly." Frank turned to Maya. "The painting constitutes physical evidence of witness testimony. The financial data encoded in it correlates with public records already showing discrepancies in the charity distributions from that period. This is enough to reopen the investigation into your father's disappearance. Enough to initiate serious inquiry into Rawls' activities." "Enough for prosecution," Maya said. "Enough to begin. Whether it reaches prosecution depends on what investigators find when they start pulling threads. This is 12-year-old evidence, Maya. Rawls has had 12 years to cover what he could. He held her gaze. This is a beginning, not an ending. What do we do now? We do this exactly right, Frank said. Completely by the book. So nothing Rawls' attorneys say later can undermine the integrity of what your father left. Rawls moved faster than any of them had anticipated. 2 days after Frank's examination, a piece appeared on a Phoenix news site questioning the authenticity of recently surfaced artwork attributed to the late Ray Cole, citing unnamed art world sources who doubted that a teenager with no formal credentials could accurately identify and authenticate complex fine art. Maya read it in the kitchen with Diane across the table. Testing your response, Diane said. I know, he wants me reactive. A public statement, an emotional response, something he can use. She set her phone down. What do you know about his other charity events, not just 12 years ago? All of them. Diane's eyes sharpened. Why specifically? Because in a courtroom, Rawls' defense will be reputation, community standing, a lifetime of philanthropy. He'll say my father was troubled that the painting is the work of a grieving man, that any financial irregularities were corrected long ago. She met Diane's eyes. We need more than the painting. We need the pattern. Diane said, give me 24 hours. She was back in 18. What she had found working with 2 chapter members in a nonprofit watchdog organization Contact in Denver was not an incident. It was a methodology. The same structure repeated across 6 charitable events over 14 years. Different names, different beneficiaries, different public profiles. Identical underlying mechanism. Money raised, money diverted. Recipients receiving substantially less than announced. Discrepancies quietly buried. The most recent event 18 months ago. Maya looked at the numbers for a long time. She thought about her father on that ride, watching donations come in, understanding over 3 days what was happening to money people who had served their country were depending on. Deciding he could not look away. Doing what he knew how to do. She thought about him in this storage unit, injured and running out of time, wrapping a canvas twice and tying the double knot he always used for work he needed to survive. Diane, she said, call Frank. Tell him we have the pattern. 14 years, 6 events, across state lines. She looked up. Tell him it's time to stop being careful and start being heard. Diane picked up her phone. That night, long after the others had gone, and the clubhouse had settled into its nighttime quiet, Maya went back to the garage. She had not planned to. She had been lying in the small room trying to sleep, and sleep had not arrived. And after an hour, she got up and walked through the building and into the space where it had all started. The garage at midnight was simply a room. Machines and tools and the particular silence of spaces usually in motion. She sat at the workbench and looked at the empty surface in front of her. Frank had called that afternoon with difficult news. Webb had identified a technical gap in the chain of custody. Photographs of the canvas had been shared among chapter members before Dr. Pruitt formally documented it. Small, manageable. But in experienced hands, small and manageable could become reasonable doubt. For a moment, sitting alone in the garage at midnight, she almost called her mother. Almost said, I found everything he left. And I don't know if it will be enough. The thought lasted exactly as long as it took her to recognize what it was. Not doubt about the truth. The truth was solid. 12 years in a locked room, and it was still solid, still intact, still exactly what her father had made it. What she doubted was herself. Whether she was equal to what he had built. Whether she had come this far only to watch a courtroom dismantle it on a technicality she should have prevented. She sat with that for a long time. The garage was very quiet. Somewhere distant, a single engine turned over and found its rhythm. Then she picked up a brush. Not to make evidence. To think. The way her father had always thought, with his hands moving, and the real thinking happening below where fear operates. And while her hands moved, she understood the answer. If Webb was going to attack her ability to recognize her father's work, to argue that her identification was compromised by emotion and the absence of formal credentials, then the response was not an argument. It was a demonstration. In front of witnesses. On record. In the only language that had never failed either of them. She looked at her hands in the low light. She was not afraid of them anymore. Part 3. The work is the truth. The call from Frank Okafor came at 7 on a Wednesday morning, 8 weeks after Maya Cole had walked through the Iron Oaths gate with a backpack and a box of paintbrushes. She was at the workbench in the garage when her phone rang. The same bench, the same spot where she had worked on the Sportster tank on the first afternoon. She had been coming here every morning before anyone else, not because work was waiting, but because this space had become where her hands and her mind operated at the same speed in the same direction. She set down her brush and looked at Frank's name for one full second before answering. "It's done," Frank said. The quiet in his voice was not the absence of feeling, but its compression held in professional shape by long practice. The arrest was this morning, Phoenix 6:30. His attorneys were present. He knew it was coming. A pause. The charges are substantial. Fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and one count connected to Route 9 12 years ago. Maya said nothing. She was looking at the ordinary commission she had been working on a member's fuel tank, something unremarkable she had been tending carefully during weeks of legal process and waiting. "Maya," Frank said, "I'm here. There's a long road between an arrest and a verdict. You understand that." "I understand. But the painting is in evidence. Varga's statement is on record. Garrett Moss's witness statement is on record. Diane's financial analysis is on record." He paused. "Your father built something that survived 12 years and the best attorney money could buy. I want you to sit with that for a moment." Maya sat with it, in the smell of paint and metal, in the morning light coming through the high windows in long pale rectangles. Then she called her mother. Her mother picked up on the first ring. "I heard," her mother said before Maya could speak. Her voice carried something Maya had not heard from her before, not in 18 years of listening carefully. Not relief alone, not grief alone, not triumph alone. Somewhere among all three where complicated things settle when they are finally allowed to exist without compression. "Diane called me 10 minutes ago." "Mom." "I'm here, Maya." "He knew," Maya said. "When he wrapped that canvas twice and tied that knot, he knew someone would find it." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "He knew it would be you," her mother said. "He just didn't know how old you'd be when you got there." Another pause. "Come home soon." "Soon," Maya said. "There's something I need to finish first." The thing she needed to finish had been waiting in the garage for 3 months. Every evening after the others went to their rooms, Maya had come back to the canvas she had stretched and primed in her second week at the Iron Oath. 8 feet wide, 5 feet tall. The largest thing she had ever made. She had told no one what it was. Stone knew she was working on something, had asked once, and accepted without question the answer that it was not ready yet, which was the answer her father had always given when someone asked about a piece before it was finished. 3 months of honest work done alone when no one was watching in the only conditions that produced the only kind of work worth making. In 4 days at the memorial gathering's closing ceremony, she would show it to the people it was made for. But first there was still the matter of how they had gotten here. Rawls had made 2 significant moves between the storage unit discovery and his arrest, and both were exactly what Maya had anticipated, which told her something useful about the kind of man he was: intelligent enough to be dangerous, but not quite flexible enough to be unpredictable. The first had been a civil filing from his legal team asserting that the canvas constituted property subject to a contractual arrangement between Rawls and Ray Cole from 12 years prior. A commission arrangement, elegantly constructed, designed to delay, to complicate, to create the appearance of legitimate dispute. Maya had read it in Frank's office across from his desk. "He just placed himself in court," Frank said with the specific quietness of a man allowing himself a carefully measured amount of satisfaction. "He's claiming a business relationship with your father. He'll have to document it, provide evidence of this commission." "And when he can't," Maya said, "the question becomes why he's claiming one that didn't exist." Frank looked at her. "His attorney is Marcus Webb. Webb and Carver Phoenix, 2 sitting senators on his client list. A Fortune 500 company that buried an environmental liability case that should have cost hundreds of millions. He is not someone you approach carelessly." "I don't intend to approach him carelessly," Maya said. "Frank, when you file the response, I want the 14-year pattern included. All 6 events, all 6 discrepancies, full documentation. In the public record before Rawls understands how much we found." "That's aggressive." "My father didn't turn away from what he found," Maya said. "He documented it and trusted that the truth was harder to destroy than the people trying to destroy it." She held Frank's gaze. "I'm his daughter." Frank filed by the end of the week. The second move came from Webb directly, a motion challenging the canvas's chain of custody, combined with a statement to Phoenix Media describing Maya as a grieving young woman whose emotional investment in her father's memory had led her to misidentify and misrepresent artwork of uncertain provenance. 3 precise paragraphs, no specific legal argument, designed entirely to establish a narrative before facts could complicate it. Maya read it in the kitchen with Diane across from her. "He's trying to make a jury see a stereotype before they see the evidence," Maya said. "Teenager, motorcycle club, grief. He wants those images in place before anyone looks at the painting or the financial records." "It's not ineffective as a strategy," Diane said carefully. "It's ineffective against the truth," Maya said. "I want to paint." Diane waited. "On record, in front of Dr. Pruitt and 2 additional independent forensic art consultants. 2 pieces, one in my own style, one in my father's, using every technique and every structural element she's already cataloged from the canvas." Maya's voice was level and certain. "Webb's argument rests entirely on the premise that I can't reliably identify my father's work because I'm too emotionally compromised to be objective. I want to eliminate that premise before it reaches a judge. Not with words, with the work." Frank arranged it in 48 hours. 2 days later, Maya sat at a work table in the garage in front of Dr. Lena Pruitt and 2 additional forensic art consultants retained from separate firms, people with no prior connection to the case and no reason to favor any particular conclusion. A notary present, a videographer documenting everything from preparation to completion. Maya worked for 4 hours. She did not perform, did not monitor reactions, did not look up to assess whether she was impressing the people watching her. She worked the way she had always worked, with the complete attention that renders everything outside the immediate surface irrelevant. The first piece she made in her own voice, the style she had been developing since 12, shaped by her father's teaching, but formed by her own eye and her own discoveries, the things she had learned that he had never known to teach her. The second she painted in deliberate, faithful reproduction of Ray Cole's documented techniques. Every structural decision, every hidden element Dr. Pruitt had cataloged, every layering sequence. She painted it the way she had learned it from 3 years of sketchbooks and from the 14 years before that of absorbing what she was not yet old enough to know she was absorbing in a garage on Saturday mornings. The 3 consultants examined both pieces for 90 minutes. Their consensus was stated without qualification. The first piece showed a distinctive, developing personal voice, clearly influenced by Ray Cole's methods, but unmistakably individual, an artist working within an inherited framework toward their own language. The second demonstrated structural understanding of Ray Cole's techniques that could only exist in someone who had received years of direct instruction, followed by years of independent, sustained study. Not imitation, not forgery, inheritance. "Webb loses the credibility argument," Frank said that evening. "The record shows you know exactly what you're looking at. He cannot claim otherwise." "He'll move to something else," Maya said. "What? The chapter. He'll argue that Stone and the others shaped my identification, that the environment here is inherently biased, that people who love my father can't objectively assess evidence connected to his death." She paused. "It's the only remaining line of attack that doesn't require him to challenge the painting's authenticity directly, which he can't do because Dr. Pruitt's work is airtight." Frank studied her for a moment. "That's a very precise prediction." "It's what I'd do," Maya said, "if I were running out of options and unwilling to admit it." Webb's next move came exactly as predicted and exactly as fast as someone running out of options moves when they are not willing to admit it. The new filing argued that the evidence had been handled, interpreted, and promoted exclusively by an organization with a documented adversarial interest in implicating Conrad Rawls, whose motivations were retaliatory rather than evidentiary. It named Stone. It named Earl. It made carefully calibrated reference to the Iron Oath's history in a way designed to let reader assumptions do the work without creating specific claims that could be directly addressed. Maya was in the main room when Stone read it on his phone. She watched him read all the way through without expression, the way he read everything before forming any response. He set the phone on the table and looked at her. "He named you too," Stone said, at the end, "as someone who came to this property seeking the chapter's support for a personal grievance." "I know," Maya said. She had read Frank's forwarded copy 20 minutes earlier. "He's betting that the image of 90 bikers and an emotional teenager is louder in a jury's mind than the evidence. He wants the stereotype in place before the facts arrive. Stone was quiet, watching her. He's wrong, Maya said, and I want to show him exactly why. She looked around the room at the people who happened to be there. Earl, Diane, Walt, Dutch, Torque, others she had come to know over 6 months. I want everyone in this chapter who knew my father to be willing to testify. Not about the painting, about him. Who he was, what he stood for, why people who knew him trusted him. She looked at Stone. Webb wants a jury to see a stereotype. I want them to see the truth. That's asking something significant, Earl said carefully. Some of our people have histories that make courtrooms complicated. I know, Maya said. I'm asking anyway. Stone looked at her with the full, unhurried attention he gave to decisions that mattered. Then he stood. I'll talk to everyone, he said. The way he said it made clear that when he finished, there would be a sufficient answer. It took 4 days, not from reluctance, which surprised Maya, from thoroughness. Many people spread across multiple states. Stone wanted every person who agreed to understand precisely what agreeing meant and exactly how Webb's attorneys would approach them. He was not assembling volunteers. He was assembling witnesses who understood what witnessing cost. 47 yes answers by the end of the 4th day. Maya heard the number and needed a few minutes alone. When she came back, Earl was watching her with the attention of someone who had been watching carefully for months. He'd be proud of you, Earl said quietly. I want you to know that. I hope so, Maya said. I know so, because what you're doing and the way you're doing it is exactly what he would have done. He always said the answer to a lie is not louder noise. It's cleaner truth. He paused. You're building cleaner truth piece by piece. That's him. That's exactly him and you. Maya sat with that for a moment. Earl, she said, the Saturday mornings when he brought me here, when I was small, you were there for most of them. Most of them, Earl said. What was he like, specifically? She paused. Not the artist, not the chapter member, the father. Earl looked at her for a long time, and his eyes had the softness that old grief acquires when something finally gives it permission to come fully to the surface. He was the most present person I have ever seen with a child, Earl said. Some people are with their kids, but you can tell a part of them is somewhere else. Not Ray. When you were there, everything else stopped. Completely. He'd be in the middle of complex work, and you'd wander over and touch something, and instead of frustration, he'd stop, explain it, show you, and then watch your face while you tried to understand it. He paused. He used to say watching you learn something was better than finishing the work. Maya pressed her hands flat on the table in front of her. He said you were going to do something with it that he hadn't imagined yet, Earl said. He didn't know what, but he was completely certain it existed. He was right, Maya said quietly. He just didn't know it was going to be this. What happened between Varga's emergence and Rawls' arrest unfolded over 3 weeks in the methodical, unglamorous way that justice works when it works through accumulated documentation and corroborating testimony and the patient construction of a record that cannot be taken apart. Garrett Moss, the retired state investigator who had worked the original Ray Cole case and had never believed the official closure was anything but premature, had kept his personal file for 11 years. He drove 4 hours to Frank's office carrying a folder that had survived 2 moves and 1 retirement because some cases stay with a person in a way that does not resolve just because someone stamps them closed. The witness statement inside from a gas station attendant on Route 9 who had seen a dark SUV stop near a downed motorcycle and then leave quickly had been in the original investigation file. Then it had not been. Moss had kept his copy because he always kept his copies. In 30 years, he had learned that the things most worth possessing are the things someone has tried to take. The partial plate from the attendant's description matched a vehicle registered to a holding company Rawls had used during that period. Not conclusive alone. Combined with everything else, it was the piece that completed a picture 3/4 assembled for 12 years. Dennis Varga came forward in the 3rd week. One of the 2 faces in the painting Maya had not recognized. 61 years old, living under a different name in Colorado for 9 years since the 3rd year after Ray Cole's disappearance, when he had understood clearly enough what Rawls was capable of, that remaining in place had become its own kind of sentence. He contacted Frank through a private attorney. His formal statement, given over 2 days in the presence of Frank, a state investigator and an assistant attorney general who had been quietly building a parallel criminal case, since Diane's financial pattern entered the public record, provided what the canvas and the documents alone could not, a human voice confirming specific acts, specific dates, and specific instructions from a specific person. The arrest warrant was signed on a Tuesday. Maya was in the garage when Frank called. She listened. She set the phone down. She looked at the ordinary fuel tank on the bench in front of her. Then she called her mother, and her mother picked up on the first ring, and for a moment the two of them simply existed together across a phone line from Tucson to New Mexico, carrying what they had always carried from opposite ends, finally arrived at the moment the carrying had been preparation for. The preliminary hearing was on a Thursday morning. Maya arrived at the courthouse with Stone and Earl and Diane. When they walked through the entrance, the security officer looked at Stone and then at Maya and then passed both of them at the parking lot behind them, because the parking lot was filling with motorcycles. 47 of them, arriving in small groups with the unhurried precision of people who had ridden together long enough to know how to arrive somewhere with collective weight. Not loud, not theatrical, simply people who had known Ray Cole coming to say so in the only way the situation allowed. Webb was very good. She had known that and prepared for it, but the particular quality of his skill was something to witness directly the ease of someone for whom losing had become theoretically possible and practically abstract. He challenged the chain of custody on the canvas with surgical precision. He questioned Dr. Pruitt's methodology with targeted technical knowledge. He made the 14-year financial pattern read as coincidence, stacked on coincidence, each discrepancy individually explainable, the whole thing the product of motivated reasoning. He was controlled professional and entirely effective at turning complexity into doubt. Maya sat beside Frank and kept her face still and her hands quiet in her lap, and did not look at Rawls, who sat 15 feet away with the composed expression of a man who had survived difficult rooms before. But she had her father's eyes. And in the half-second when Rawls walked past Frank's case files and his gaze slipped involuntarily toward the canvas photographs, she saw what was behind the composure. Not confidence, not the ease of a man protected by a system that had always protected him. Fear. The genuine kind, the kind that 12 years of construction had been built to contain and was now finding the cracks in those walls. Frank's response was not dramatic. It was methodical and relentless and airtight, in the way that things built from solid materials are not through force, but through fit. He walked Judge Carolyn Marsh through the forensic authentication timeline with Dr. Pruitt's analysis, as the foundation built Diane's financial documentation. On top of it, placed Moss's recovered witness statement at the point where it completed the picture already three-quarters assembled, and placed Varga's testimony as the human confirmation of what the documents had established in their more durable and permanent way. He did not raise his voice once. When he sat down, the courtroom had the quality of a space where something had finally arrived in its correct position. Judge Marsh looked at her notes. Early 60s, the expression of someone who recognizes the difference between a complicated case and a case that has been made to seem complicated. "I'm going to allow the civil claim to proceed," she said. "I'm also referring the full financial documentation to the State Attorney General's office for review." She looked at Webb over her glasses with an expression that contained its own complete argument. "Counsel, your client's ownership claim will be heard on its merits. I would suggest those merits be substantial." She adjourned. Rawls followed Webb out without looking at anyone. Eyes forward, pace, steady expression, neutral, the performance of composure by a man who could no longer generate the genuine article. Maya let out a slow breath and felt something release in her chest. "That's not over," Frank said. "I know," Maya said. "But it's different now." "Very different," Frank said, and he came close to smiling. The memorial gathering fell on a Saturday in late October, 6 months after Maya had first walked through the gate. Stone had organized it as a chapter event. It became considerably larger than that, the way events become larger than their containers, when the need for them is greater than anyone fully accounted for. Former members drove from 4 states. People who had known Ray Cole outside the chapter, customers, who had commissioned his work, artists, who had known him from exhibitions, people from the neighborhood in Albuquerque where he had grown up. By 9 in the morning, the parking logistics had exceeded initial estimates by a significant margin, and Torque, assigned to manage this, was doing so with the resigned competence of someone making peace with a problem they had underestimated. 212 motorcycles left the clubhouse at noon in formation. The sound of them filled the air with what Maya had been carrying in her body since before she had language for it, and she stood at the edge of the lot, and let it move through her the way it always had in the chest, before the mind in the place where the most permanent things are stored. She rode in the support vehicle with Diane. They talked the entire way, not about the case or the upcoming trial or Rawls or Webb or the Attorney General's office. About Ray Cole. Stories Diane had been holding for years, specific and clear, and full of the small, precise details that are the actual substance of a person rather than the outline. By the time the ride returned in the late afternoon, Maya knew her father in ways she had not known him that morning. That was what the day kept giving. Each person who had known him adding one more specific truth, building a person out of accumulated testimony the way her father had built truth into accumulated paint. At the end of the gathering, when the food was finished and the stories had been told, and the late October light had gone the particular amber that light achieves in the high desert, at that hour and in that season, Stone stepped onto the bed of a truck and called for quiet. 200 people settled. "Most of you know why we're here," Stone said. His voice carried without effort the natural carry of a man who has everyone's complete attention. Ray Cole was a brother, an artist, a man who found the truth when finding it was inconvenient and documented it when documenting it was dangerous, and trusted that someone would eventually come looking. He paused. Someone came looking. He looked at Maya at the edge of the crowd. She walked in here 6 months ago with a sketchbook in her father's hands and more courage than most people twice her age will find in a lifetime. She asked if she could paint bikes for tips. A sound moved through the crowd. Not quite laughter, not quite tears. The specific human sound that lives between those two things. "We owe her considerably more than tips," Stone said. "So tonight she's going to show us something she's been working on for 3 months. And after that, anyone who wants to say something about Ray Cole can say it." He stepped down. Maya walked to the center of the lot where a large canvas had been mounted on a framed torque, and 2 others had built. It was covered with black cloth. She stood before it and looked at 200 people looking at her. She thought about what to say. She decided not to say anything. She reached up and pulled the cloth free. The crowd went silent so completely that the cloth falling was audible across the entire lot. The painting was 8 feet wide and 5 feet tall, made over 3 months of evenings alone in the garage, after everyone else had gone, in the only conditions that produce honest work. It showed a highway, not a specific road with a name and a number. The highway, the one that exists in the understanding of everyone who has learned that the road is a truth, rather than a metaphor, something chosen and then chosen again, something you become by the act of continuing. On that highway, rendered with every technique her father had taught her, and everything she had discovered since 90 riders moved forward together. Not toward anything visible, not away from anything, simply moving because the movement was the point and had always been the point. At the front, slightly ahead of the rest, a man with large, capable hands and dark, quiet eyes, and the posture of someone who had made peace with the road he was on. Far behind him, very small in the distance, a little girl in a yellow jacket on a bicycle with training wheels, leaning forward, pedaling as hard as her small legs could manage. And further ahead, closer to the man at the front, the same girl at 17 or 18, riding beside him on a real machine, keeping pace without effort, exactly where she belonged. Above all of it, in the clear letter forms her father had taught her, when she was 7 years old, 4 words. Family is the road. Earl made a sound beside her that he tried to contain and could not entirely manage. Torque turned away for a long moment, his shoulders tight. Walt Hicks pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and looked up at the darkening sky. Dutch, who had moved through 35 years of significant moments without showing what they cost him, stood very still with his eyes bright. Stone looked at the painting. He found the man at the front of the highway and stayed there looking at him with the complete, unhurried attention he gave to things that mattered most. Whatever moved across Stone's face in that long moment was between him and Ray Cole, and Maya looked away and let it be private. The crowd was quiet for longer than ordinary silence lasts. The silence of people who have been given something that requires time to receive, who understand that some things are honored only by the willingness to be still with them. Then one person began to clap, then another, then everyone all at once, and Maya stood in the middle of it and let it move through her the way that sound had always moved through her before memory, before language, in the place where things too important for memory are kept. Diane appeared at her shoulder and placed one hand briefly on her back without saying a word. The gesture of a woman who understood that some moments are diminished by speech. Earl came to stand beside her. Walt appeared at the edge of her vision. Dutch was there, and Torque and Stone and all the rest of them assembling around her the way they had assembled around her father for 2 decades, without announcement or ceremony, simply because that was what they did for their own. Stone came and stood in front of her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her on the first afternoon, with the full weight of a man who takes nothing lightly. "You came here for answers," he said. "I did," Maya said. "Did you find them?" Maya looked at the painting, at the highway and the riders, and the man at the front and herself behind him, and beside him, and the four words above it all that said the only thing that needed to be said. She looked at the 200 people standing in the amber October light of the New Mexico evening. People who had kept a storage unit locked for 6 years out of loyalty, kept a key in a pocket for 4 years because letting go had not felt right, kept a memory alive for 12 years because that was what you did for someone who had been yours, who were standing beside his daughter now for exactly the same reason, without being asked, without announcement, because it was simply what they did. "I found more than answers," Maya said. "I found what he was trying to tell me." "What was that?" Stone said. Maya looked at him, at all of them. "That he never really left." No one spoke. The amber light held everything still for one long moment. The painting and the crowd and the October evening and the 12 years of absence that had become through 6 months of work and the willingness of many people to keep a thing alive long enough for the right person to find it something closer to presence than anyone had allowed themselves to expect. Her father had painted the truth into everything he touched, into fuel tanks and canvases and the hidden corners of wing designs and the 3 sketchbooks he had left in a box for a daughter who was 6 years old when he last saw her, into the hands he had shaped and the eyes he had given her and the particular way of reading a surface before touching it that she had absorbed in a garage on Saturday mornings before she was old enough to understand what she was absorbing or what it would one day be asked to do. The work had survived. The truth had survived. The thing built in secret had spoken louder than 12 years of someone else's silence. Maya looked at her hands one final time in the fading light. The hands her father had given her. The hands she now trusted completely and without reservation, the way her father had trusted them. The way she had been slowly learning to trust them since the first morning she understood what they were capable of. Then she looked up at the painting at the road without a visible end, because it did not need one, at the man riding ahead, and the girl catching up, and the same girl riding finally beside him. And she understood what she had always been moving toward without knowing its name. She was not behind him anymore. She was beside him, right where she had always been going, right where he had always known, with the particular certainty of a father who studies his daughter's hands and her eyes and the way she looks at things, that she would one day arrive.